Well, hello, everybody, and welcome back to 6 Feet Under Exhumed. I'm Kari the Mortician.
I'm Faith, that mortuary professor.
Ooh, and I don't have my ringer turned off on my phone. I'm gonna turn it
Uh-oh.
off right now.
Uh-oh. You good?
Yeah, that's all right. We can start again.
Okay.
So, X. All right. Well, hey, everyone. Welcome back to our next edition of 6 Feet Under Exhumed. I'm Kari the Mortician.
I'm Faith, that mortuary professor, and we are going to talk about the episode The Room today.
Episode 6. I was like, wow, are we really this many
I
in?
know, it didn't seem like it's been that many, but I
Are.
guess it has.
And I don't recall, like going into this episode, I was like, what room are they really talking about? And had forgotten kind of some of this episode, and kind of makes me a little jealous. I kind of want what they find out about
I
this.
know.
I think everybody should have a room.
You don't have a room?
No.
I have a
Well, I have
shed.
my office, but it's work.
Yeah,
I feel like, yeah, we'll have to get into that when we talk about what the
yeah,
room is. So
for
we
sure.
start off that sweet Mr. Jones wakes up, and what I think is hilarious. I mean, it's a little crass, but he's like, come on, bitch, get your lazy
I
ass up.
know.
Let's get breakfast. And then Miss Hattie is dead in the bed. And you see this man throughout the thing advocating, like, this is my wife. And I love it. I love seeing like the long time marriage where the person, especially the husband, advocates for what they want for their wife. This is my person. This is my wife. Don't you tell me what to do. Don't you recommend anything. This is what's happening. So that's kind of where we start.
Yeah,
And
I mean,
dive in.
he just gets up and she's died in her sleep, and he's just
Yeah.
going about his morning and doesn't realize it, and then tries to wake her up. And I mean, don't you kind of wish we could all go like that?
Just peaceful. I mean,
Yeah,
it's a crappy shock for your
it
person you're
is.
with. I think that would be like the absolute worst, is to wake up and then your person's just gone, and wondering like, when did they go in the night? Did they go right away? Was it like 5 minutes ago? What if I'd woken up an hour ago?
Yeah,
Like I think I would do a lot of questionable what ifs with that.
for sure.
I think as many people do with every scenario, but that is kind of a fear of mine, is
I think
waking up
it's
and then your person's
something we want for ourselves, though. Like, I don't want to be in the hospital. I don't want to be in this
no,
or
you
that.
just want to drift
But then
off.
somebody's got to find you, and that's not, you know what I mean?
That's true.
That's not great either. But yeah, I mean, and they don't have any family or anything, and
It's
so
just and it's sweet. And he's like, don't you touch my wife. He sits down to meet with David, and he's like, well, if we want a view, then you're going to need embalming. And he makes me cringe every time the way
God.
he talks like about urns as receptacles, and the terms he uses, and I'm like, gosh, you are that cringy, like, oh,
I know.
dude.
That really, I forgot about that part of the episode, and watching that back, I was like, oh God, that's none of that is true, and it's just this whole, well, if you want to, you have to have embalming to view, and you have to, and you don't. And maybe, this is 20 something years old, and I don't think,
Right.
we do have to remember that it was a different time in funeral service. And I think a lot of people did still believe that, and still thought that. But it just made me, yeah, it just made me cringe, because you can view an unembalmed body. It's okay.
When it's not like it's a car accident or it's severely
Mhm.
decomposed, like she literally passed in her sleep, or died in her sleep. I hate saying pass. I don't know why I just said that. But when David goes, well, you're not going to see her and nobody else,
Oh,
you don't embalm. And I'm like, what happened to her in the last hour or two since she died that has made her so tragic looking? And then he comes in to view her later and is like, that's not my wife. And Federico's like, well, it is. He's like, no, no, everything about her is gone. And we hear that a lot.
yeah.
People come in, they look at their loved one, they're like, that doesn't look like them. It's like, well, they're not
You've never seen
slapping.
them dead before,
Yeah. How
you
often
know,
do you sit and look at them laying
at
there
somebody laying down,
too?
and if they with their glasses on and their eyes closed, or I mean,
Yeah.
nobody looks like themselves when they're dead, because you've never seen them dead, and you don't look at people in that position and in
Mhm.
those clothes, or in, you know, the glasses on with eyes. People don't sleep with their glasses on, you
No.
know. So there's a lot of things that go into that that are not, they're not natural. That's not
Well, and
how
there's not
people,
a single muscle that's
yeah,
engaged in your face. Everything is lax. You got gravity working against you. So it definitely creates a different visual. And personality is what makes someone really
yeah,
them. And when there is no, laughter, smiles, anything, it just changes that body from being the person into a body, truly,
yeah.
in a lot of ways. Not that it's not a person, but
It's
everything that
different.
made them is really gone aside
Yeah,
from the shell.
it's absolutely different. But it really, I have to tell you, it really did bother me just hearing how he talked about embalming in that little scene.
Super
And
cringe.
God, that's why people think we're all these bad things. And it was just, and it's one of those things is like, did the writers know that and did that on purpose, or was that really how they thought it should be? Like, did they think that was accurate? And the sad thing is it probably is accurate. There's probably still a lot of funeral homes out there that do that. And I think it's important for everybody to know that embalming is not required by law. He didn't say it was
Anywhere.
required. Yeah, he never said that, but a lot of times people make that assumption and it's not. But you could just tell that the idea of, letting a husband view his wife unembalmed was so foreign to them. And I'm just
Mhm.
thinking, well, what about cremation IDs? Do they not do that there? I mean, our brains
I think
go,
that was before really that was a thing. I think it was either
yeah,
you did cremation and you did nothing else,
mhm,
or you did your traditional embalming. And
yeah,
cremation was really seen as a business killer, so to
yeah,
speak. So, I think at that time it was viewed so much differently because you didn't as much do the rental casket and things that we do now, where we've
mhm,
expanded options and we've educated people to know that these things are options. It's not just as finite as cremate, nobody see them, or have a full traditional everything with embalming. And that's what's nice about the progression of the business is that there's so
sure.
many more options with it.
There's so many, and we know better now, and
Yeah.
most, I think most places are a lot more. Funeral homes can absolutely make it their business policy to require embalming for public viewing. That's their right as a small business, and they're not wrong to do that. But I think we have come a long way, and that in at least all the funeral homes I know and am friends with and have worked in, were always, very, there is a benefit to embalming. There's a reason for it, and there's a time and a place for it, and it's never wrong to embalm somebody unless someone doesn't want it. But I think we have come a long way in understanding that we can still, families can still spend time with their loved ones if they're not embalmed. So that scene just, oh gosh, I don't know, it just made me
Yeah.
feel so icky, but you know
And
it's
then
a show.
Nate finds this book
Mhm.
and or no, he goes to get his car repaired at a repair shop, and the guy's like, well, you don't pay me. And he's like, well, what are you talking about? He's like, your dad did a funeral for me and all my business I do is in trade for you. And he was like, whoa. And so then Nate looks into it and finds the ledger and
Mhm.
these numbers that have stars next to them. And so he starts looking into them, which I think is so fun, the different businesses he visits and the stories and everything. Do you want to talk about that a
Yeah.
little?
Yeah. I mean, he's kind of finding things out about his dad that he never knew. And I think it makes him feel kind of sad that he never got to really know his dad that way. And I think we can all relate to that. There comes a point, I think, in everybody's life where you see that your parents are just people.
Yep.
And maybe the version of them that you saw as a kid, and Nate moved away, and I don't recall how long he had been gone for, but um, I think it was representative of him realizing that his dad was a fully formed human and not just his dad, the Undertaker, and that, oh, he did nice things for people and he didn't make a big deal out of it, and he smoked pot, and he did all these things and listened to music that you would never expect. And so it's kind of cool to see that, but I think he also felt very sad that he was never given a chance to know that person.
Yeah, I think all the kids have gone through that kind of during this grief journey. That they've learned about their dad, things that they wish they had known so they could have related to him, because they
Yeah.
thought he was so standoffish, not paying attention to them, not involved in what they were doing because he worked so much. And then, like, Nate starts hearing from all these places. He goes and speaks to the one woman who gives him his monthly weed allowance that his dad had been getting, and finds out how funny he was and how much she enjoyed talking to him and missed talking to him. And then he goes to the business restaurant, and he'd been using this room, and they had given him this room, it was dumpy room, had a little couch, little sink, little table, chair, record player. Yeah. And Nate just keeps imagining what his dad's doing in this room, looking at newspapers and magazines, and there's a glass with some lipstick on it. And so it's like, what is that about? And, what kind of life was my dad living that I would have, appreciated knowing about and being a part of. And, and I think it's cool that he had a space where he could be not just funeral director man and not just him. I remember seeing not a meme but something recently, and it said, let's remember that our parents are living their first life too.
Yeah.
And that has just resonated so loudly with me the last few weeks that, for my kids, knowing that, hey, this is my first time doing it, and how much I put aside to do things for them. And that's my choice in the one life I'm living. And my parents did the same, and understanding that. And, it kind of comes full circle, which is wild. And I think that's what Nate realized was, man, dad was just living his life and doing his thing just like I am. So
yeah. And then he finds a photo album with pictures of his mom when she was really your little dog tail.
I know. Yeah. Kari got a puppy.
Show him.
Yeah, he just ran away.
Oh, he ran away. But then if he finds pictures of his mom, and I think that's a moment for you too, when you realize, oh, my parents aren't just two people that are my parents. They actually have a relationship amongst the two of them, and sometimes it takes till you're 35 years old to really see that, oh, my parents were, before kids, they actually were people, and they met somewhere,
and they got naked, and they had sex, and they were, they had the same drive and instincts and desires that we have as younger people too. And they went through all that. And that's kind of fun to see about your parents, It
is. It's always, it was, for some reason for me, it was like this moment when I realized that I'm older than my parents were when they had me. I'm like I'm 40, and my mom was 29 when she had me. I think about that. And so I think, oh my God, I have an 8-year-old, but when my mom was my age, I was older than that.
Yeah.
And it's just when you start realizing, when I was a kid and had this relationship with my parents, when I was like a preteen, my mom was this old. And I thought she was this old, grown, knew everything person, and I don't know anything. So she probably felt the same way. But no, he, I really like that plot line of oh my God, I look at his eyebrows. He's so cute. Hi.
He's so confused by life right now. I just got him last night, so I'm a walking zombie today, guys. It's like a newborn, doesn't know how to do anything. So
does he have puppy breath?
He does. Puppy breath, smells good. Just, full on puppy everything. Littlest teeth ever. Yeah, he's like 10 weeks old. So, he's so fun.
I love it.
Now we go back to, also, we've got stuff at the church going on. Dave's all involved at the church, and we got crazy Tracy coming after him kind of through the whole episode, because they're doing these volunteering, and she's just like literally throwing herself
at him.
I just need some sex, and I just need, and he's like, go to the bar,
right?
Which he ends up doing. He's given advice for kind of himself and doesn't realize it. And he keeps driving past this gay bar the whole time, and then ends up going and finding somebody, and, whether it's what he needed or wanted.
Yeah.
Sure.
But he's at church, and then the man that Ruth was having an affair with,
Hiram,
is there as well. Hiram, and David puts 2 and 2 together and kind of has this nasty reaction to him, which I mean, I think that's normal. You know, I mean, I don't know. I mean, maybe as an adult it would be different, but I think that it's definitely uncomfortable if you're like, "Oh, here's the man I was cheating on your father with."
Right.
You know, so he's not exactly warm or welcoming to Hiram, and they have a little interaction and go their separate ways. But oh my gosh, I forgot what I was going to say about that. But David says something. So they're in the church meeting about hiring a new priest or a new, associate priest or something. And they're talking about it. David, and there was a comment made in that meeting that struck me. And one of the older people on that board said, "Oh, you just have this next generation in here so that they can outvote us old people and get radical people in here." And I thought, gosh, how often do we hear that in the funeral industry from
The
the older
changes and,
crowd? The
things
changes,
coming.
and yeah, and how, those older people can be not very welcoming to the younger
Right.
generations, because they're afraid of the changes that they might bring.
When we meet the other man in mom's life, Nikolai, the florist, who is trying to eat the microphone, who is hot to trot for mom. And I kind of love that she's got these men like coming out of the woodwork for her now and wanting to pursue her, and she's like, "Don't you dare." Like she coyly puts him off and acts like she doesn't like it, but then I think she likes feeling like a woman again, but yet I think she also is not giving herself permission yet.
Right.
And so I kind of like that there's a little love triangle that might be starting in this episode.
Yeah, I think it's kind of nice that they don't just write her off as like now she's a nun or something because she's
Yeah,
old and her husband died. Like
she's
she's still,
widowed
yeah,
and
she still has a romantic whole life. And
mhm.
I appreciate that about that show too, that everybody gets to be a full person, her
Yes.
included.
And they show that, it's you're never done with the human side of who you are. You don't have to be defined by just being a student, being a funeral director, being a wife of somebody. Like you are your own whole person and your desires and wishes matter. And I love that underline in it because it really just makes you realize, okay, you do have to kind of go after what you want and advocate for yourself and find your happy place like dad did and find a room that he could go do his thing in. And, he might have been just sitting there doing literally nothing salacious, but just having space. Because in that funeral
Everybody
home, I mean,
needs
living
it.
and working in the same building, you got to get away somehow.
You have to get away, and there's always people around, and there's always somebody, wanting you to do something for them. And I think as moms, you and I can understand
Oh
that, right?
gosh.
Like if I'm awake, somebody needs something or wants something from me.
Yeah.
It feels like whether it's my daughter or the dog or, a student or somebody always needs something, or you always have to be thinking about anticipating someone else's needs. Like, all right, it's Sunday. I got to do her laundry because tomorrow's Monday. And so you
Yep.
have to constantly be considering everybody else. And when work is downstairs and you don't even get a commute, uh,
Mm-mm.
that just really bleeds over into it. And I think that he needed just somewhere to be himself. And I think, we haven't gotten into it much in these episodes, but as the show unfolds, we see more and more. This isn't a spoiler in any way of the relationship between Ruth and Nathaniel. And I think that relationship had broken down over time, and he felt suffocated by her.
Mm-hmm.
She felt some kind of way about him. So when you're living in a home environment where the relationships are strained, and then you've got dead people in the basement you got to take care of, and they're crying families, and they're like, I can't imagine that,
A lot.
it's a lot.
It's kind of
And
a big pressure cooker that they're
it
in that
is.
they don't really get away from ever. Because I'm guessing they didn't go on many date nights or
Of course
much
not.
of anything because you got work to do and you have to tend to this and you got to be there in case someone dies or if, and I think we get in that role as funeral directors sometimes when you're in small towns, especially, or depending on your work schedule, like you become a slave to that schedule sometimes. And it really, overwhelms and burns you out fast. And that's kind
Yeah.
of, I think, what happened with them.
And I think that, it says something to the fact that, well, what I like so many things about the show, but like I said before, everybody gets to be a whole person, and they really do, without being obvious about it, touch on just some things that we all encounter. And I like that it was him that had his own room, not someone else,
Yeah.
because oftentimes, the we forget about the men, right?
Mhm.
We disenfranchise men in grief. We go, oh my God, you shouldn't cry. You're a boy. You're a man. You're this or that.
Yep, be
And we forget,
strong.
yeah, and we forget that they've lost somebody too. And I don't know if this has ever happened to you, but just with that older man in this episode, it reminded me of it for some reason. But have you ever made arrangements with a family where the mom has died and there's a couple of kids and the dad is surviving and the dad starts crying and the kid, it's like they don't even know what to do. They can't even look at him.
Because
They're
they've probably never
so
seen it. They've probably
never.
never witnessed dad breaking down or
Yeah.
anything.
But if it were the mom and she started crying, everybody would be like, oh, mom, or, put their arm around her, give her a hug, or comfort her in some way. But when it's dad that starts crying, everybody just gets like really uncomfortable. Um,
Well, and we see Claire.
yeah.
She gets to meet Billy, which is Brenda's brother, and kind of is intrigued by him. And they do a little making out and a little hanging out, but his bipolar flares up and he's like, well, who are you? Why are you calling me? And she's like, we made out yesterday. Did you want to do it again? He's like, what do you think I am, a pedophile? You're like 16, go away, and like hang
Oh,
up on her. And so, 16-year-old girl heart, Jim and me, this boy like is showing interest and
mhm.
tells you nice things and then crushes you. Like
Yeah,
poor Claire. She just needs to get a break somewhere. Poor Claire.
she does. But I mean, gosh, he's one of my favorite characters in the whole show, honestly. I think he's so well acted as well, but he is very toxic. And it really just shows that, he can manipulate and control people very easily. Whether he's doing
Mhm.
it purposefully or not is not really clear. But, he spends all this time with her, does these things with her, and then yeah, you're right. The next day she calls him and he's like, no, I don't like you. It's like, well,
Yeah.
you did yesterday. And
Yep.
then it's just, but then Brenda comes along and kind of, I think she, again, without saying it, witnesses what's happening there and kind of takes Claire under her wing a little bit and kind
Yeah.
of,
They have some really
um,
nice moments
yeah,
her
has
and
some things with
Claire
her.
do.
Yeah.
And
Because
then,
of that relationship there. And I think she sees how troubling that can be, but she doesn't want to be like, yeah, my brother, he's terrible. He's, you don't want to say that either,
yeah,
but you kind of know.
when they're both there, so it's Claire there when Mr. Jones comes and says, I want to see my wife. And she's like, I don't deal with the dead people. And he's like, I want to see her. And she's like, nobody's here that can let you see her. And then he kind of comes in, and then Brenda comes in and she looks, and Claire's on the couch and he's fallen asleep on her shoulder and is holding her hand. And Brenda's like, well, is he dead? And she's like, I don't think so. And he's
Yeah.
not. But,
Isn't it?
you kind of are like, oh, did that happen?
I
And
know.
it's kind of a sweet, I don't know, Claire. I like a lot of Claire moments. I just,
Me
we
too.
talk about this a lot too, because you're like, yeah, I was the same age when I was watching it and really identified. And she has such a full arc of her,
Mhm.
what she goes through in this whole
Yeah.
series. And she finally is being seen and she's finally being heard and she's finally
Yeah.
having integral moments where she's contributing and she is a part of things and she's not just this child in some
Right.
ways. And I think Brenda giving her an acknowledgement like, yep, let's hang out. They have a beer together and just chat. And I think that gives her this like recognition, which is
Mhm.
nice.
Yeah. What I don't like is when they're like, well, we're going to go. Somebody will be here later. Like, you don't leave somebody alone at the funeral home.
No, like
Hello. Okay.
wandering
Listen,
and doing whatever.
listeners, we'd never leave a family or a public alone in the building and leave. Not knowingly, at least.
No.
But like, that was like, what, you're just going to leave this poor man. He's going to go down there and do God knows what. But yeah, not a good idea. Not a good thing. Wouldn't happen in real life, I
No.
would.
No. Hey,
But
just go wander through the building. Thanks. I'll see you later.
they do that anyway when there's people there.
Right?
People are so funny, but they're just curious.
So,
Yeah.
and then Mr. Jones
Yeah.
comes and sits with his wife 2 days in a row, and the casket has no lid. Did you notice the
I
top
did.
half of it
It's like a
is
priest
just
casket.
open, kind
Yeah.
of like a coffin would be. So it was
Yeah.
interesting. I was like, where the heck's the lid and what kind of casket is? I've never seen one in our area that would even be like that, which I'm
Have
sure you
you
can
seen
get
a
one.
Trappist? I think Trappists, the whole lids come off. They're like a priest casket where the whole,
Yeah, I went to their manufacturing, did a
yeah,
video there,
they're,
but
they
I
come off.
do they?
I don't know. I feel like they
The ones
do.
I've
I've
seen
seen them
open
from
like a
Mexico.
regular, but maybe they do have some that just the lid
I
comes
think
off.
they,
I'll have to go look.
somebody, if somebody knows something, tell us in the chat. We can't remember.
Yeah.
But I think that I've seen them from Mexico when I've had ship-ins from Mexico. Have you
Yeah,
seen
and the
with the
lids.
glass
Yep.
cover? Those are
Some
cool.
Asian ones as well have either just a little hole cut out
Yeah.
or the glass on top for plexiglass or whatever they have.
Yeah, I remember the
Definitely a
first
little
time I
different.
saw one for it was from Mexico that came as a ship in, and it looked like a regular casket, but when you opened it up, it had glass,
Yeah.
and I was like, "Do we take this off? What is this?" They're like, "No, no, no." But do you know why that is? Is that was that like some kind of
I don't know
fear
if
of
it's just a
disease, I
viewing
think,
thing or maybe
or
they're
what?
concerned with health or
Yeah,
I don't know. Honestly, we'll have to look
interesting.
into that.
Yeah, that's interesting.
We'll have
But
to
yes, the whole
research
lid
that.
was off, which I did notice, and was like, okay,
And he's just sitting there holding her hand, and mom comes in with the flowers. Oh, look at the beautiful flowers for your wife. And he's like, she's still dead. Like,
yeah.
does that mean I'm supposed to be happy? Like, what are you saying? It was just, I think he says the things that most people think, but they don't verbalize. And he just like
He
word
was a
vomits it.
character that to kind of give, insight into what people are probably really thinking.
Right.
And I have to tell you, I have had families like usually it's a daughter-in-law or like a not like an immediate family, but
Yep.
there's usually somebody in the family that's that person usually. And I remember one family specifically, one of my favorite families I ever served. And we're still friends on Facebook 15 years later, but their
Oh,
daughter and one of the daughter-in-laws just had no use for me. She didn't trust funeral directors, didn't trust anything. Everything was wrong. Everything was terrible. And by the end of it, we were like best friends. But she was that person, just that person that would say all the things. And I have to be honest with you, as a funeral director, I like those people. I appreciate that because it's real.
yeah.
You can't make somebody, you can't answer questions they don't ask. You can't, you know what I mean? If somebody's
Yep.
got a problem with something, then you can do something about it.
Mhm.
So I appreciated that about him, and I thought he was funny, and I think he was a really good character to kind of give that insight into how people might be feeling inside that most of them won't, they won't say.
Verbalize.
They won't
Well, and
verbalize.
then he dies. So
And he
Nate
died.
goes into, Mr. Jones, you should probably go home, and he's dead. And I'm like, okay, what happens next? Like, what did you do, guys?
I
Because you're gonna,
know.
at that point, you're calling the medical examiner's office,
Yeah.
and the EMTs are coming, and the police, and the medical examiner investigator, and they're gonna check him out. And then did they put her burial on hold? And who took care of his if they have no like I'm asking
I
all
know.
the questions because
I
I'm like,
know.
how would they have written that out? Like
Yep.
what would they have written in as and would it be a reality of what would actually happen?
Yeah, I mean, it would really, he would have gone to the coroner's office. I
Yeah.
mean, they wouldn't just be like, well, he's at the funeral home, just leave him here.
Just
They would
keep
have
them.
taken it. No,
Unless they, because like here, if they ruled it a natural death and the primary was gonna do it, then they come right to the funeral home.
yeah,
So if that happened and he had pre-existing conditions, they came and looked at him, they might just leave him there.
yeah,
But who's his family that's gonna choose that funeral home for him? Kind of thing,
right.
So a lot of questions. Have you ever had that somebody die at a funeral or
Not added, not, I mean, I've had people like have to be medically taken away, but they nobody actually like was dead there
yeah.
during a funeral. Have you?
The day of I think it was the husband's funeral. The wife was so ill she wasn't coming and they called and said she has died. And the family came up to me and it was right before and they're like, what do you want to do? And I said, well, what do you want to do? I said, we can hold the funeral today. I said, but instead of going to the cemetery, we'll just,
Just wait.
hold dad here and then we can do a service for mom and bury them both at the same time. I said, I'll call everybody while the funeral's going on and get it all lined up. And that's what we ended up doing. And we had her funeral like 3 days later or whatever.
I've had
I've
a
had
few
double
cases.
deaths, but
Yeah,
not
right.
like somebody come in and die. We have had to call the ambulance for some
Yeah,
spouses and stuff, but
for sure. Yeah, I've had a handful of doubles, where, it was like an accident situation. Somebody
yeah,
died and somebody made like the other spouse, died the next day or day later, or, families I've had homicides where somebody, killed multiple members of a
yeah,
family at once. So we definitely do have services for more than one person at the same time in the same family. And I've
yeah.
also had people that like dad will pass away and like he'll be cremated and they'll hold on to the urn. And then when mom dies, they'll do a double funeral.
Yep.
I've had that several times too. So it's not uncommon. It's definitely
Yeah.
something anybody that's a funeral director will experience. But no, I have never had anyone be pronounced dead at the funeral home. Now,
Yeah.
some I'm not sure how it ended, to be honest with you, because it wasn't my family, and I don't remember. But yeah, we've had people had to be taken away by ambulance, but nobody that I remember actually was like pronounced dead at the funeral home.
When this episode was more of like a low key. Not a ton happened, a few really key things. Um, the biggest, it ends with mom going over to Hiram's house and like say kissing him and basically like, okay, let's do this. Kind of, she made the decision, and that's kind of how the whole thing concludes, is with her making out with Hiram on the porch, sort of
We're
thing.
getting more into the character development of the season.
Yes.
We started heavy with the funeral stuff at the beginning, I think, to get people's interest. And
Yeah.
now we're not seeing that go away. It never goes away. It's always a show about a family that owns a funeral home, but it's becoming more more characters in the show, and their plots are coming out a little bit
Yeah.
more.
Well, and I think you have to do that in drama
Mhm.
shows. You have to build the plot line, be exciting, build the plot
Oh,
line,
sure.
develop characters. And so a few of these episodes, they're good, but they're not as like big, huge things. And so you have one or two, and then you get back to some more of the drama of the funeral home and Kroner and everything,
Yeah.
which Kroner comes back around in a couple, episodes.
Yeah.
So
I think the show does a really good job of balancing it, where it's like you have to have character development, you have to have
mhm,
character plot and interest in the characters, or nobody's going to watch it.
right.
But also, they do still, even through all 5 seasons, they still keep it about funeral service too. So,
Yeah.
but you're right, it kind of like comes up and down and up and down. And
Yep.
this episode was more character driven, but they definitely had some interesting things happen, within the funeral home with that man and his wife. And it's
Yeah.
amazing, isn't it amazing how many things they can pack into just like 45 minutes or 50
It
minutes?
is when we go back to my notes and I talk to you and I'm like, did that all really happen? Some of it,
Yeah.
I think the church thing was the next episode with the deacon, that whole thing that you were mentioning. I think that was the
Was
next one.
it? We
Yeah.
watch, at least I don't know about you, Carrie.
I binge
I watch
watched the
two or
ones that
three
we're
at a
gonna
time.
do.
Yeah. And so we
And
may
so
get them.
there's crossover, which
Yeah,
is
we
fine.
may talk about something that's coming up in the next episode accidentally here and there, but we watch them. At least I do. If I know we're gonna talk about these couple of ones, I don't watch them like back to back, and
Yeah,
sometimes.
it's easier. And I watch
Yeah.
them right before we're going to record
Yep.
usually. And that way they're fresh and I'm remembering all the little fun details to
Mhm.
talk about. So, what did you guys notice in this episode, episode 6, The Room of 6 Feet Under, and rehash it with us here on Exhumed. So, we'll see you guys for the next one.
Thank you. See you next time.
Bye.